Time for another analysis. Today we're going to talk about the crazy together scene. I've had a couple of requests for this one and I can see why. It's a big deal. So before we ever even get to the Wheelers' basement, we see that Will has a vision of the mind flare and he gets really scared. Mike is the one to find him and he shows a lot of concern for Will. He tells Will that he's going to take him home, and when their friends try to intervene, he gets very possessive. He practically puts Will in a death grip while pushing his friends away. This is pretty typical Mike behavior. He feels like he's the only one who's worthy of being Will's protector. When we get to the Wheelers' basement, the camera slowly zooms in at the beginning of the scene, and then it repeats this by slowly zooming back out at the end. They're really taking their time showing us what's going on in this scene. Also, as you can see, Mike gives Will a little up and down glance. Will explains what's going on to Mike and basically tells him that he doesn't want him to share this information with anybody else. I believe this is the first heart-to-heart we see with these two, but definitely not the last. This scene lets us in on just how special their friendship is. They really take their time with this scene. Mike sneaks in a couple of glances because, of course he does. It wasn't actually until I went back and watched this scene recently that I even noticed this. Mike brings up the fact that he thinks Eleven would understand what's going on with Will, and they show us that Will looks a little bit disappointed by this information. This gives us some clues into the fact that Will is already semi-aware of how he feels about Mike. They agree to go crazy together and they serve each other these smiles that we then see again in season 4. These two scenes do have some parallels. If you think about the content of both scenes, they're really expressing to each other that they're important to each other. These particular smiles are used consistently between the two of them, and I think it's probably intentional at this point. Interestingly, we see very similar smiles again in the van scene. We see another parallel to this scene at the very end of season 4 in Hopper's cabin. Now, this is not a direct parallel by any means, but the way that the scene is shot is very similar. Also, the content of the conversation is very similar. Will is explaining something having to do with his connection to the Upside Down, while Mike listens intently. The number of heart-to-hearts we saw between these two in season 4 was exponentially higher than any other season. But the crazy together scene is where it all started, and they continue to call back to that scene. Whatever's going on between these two, they want us to know that it's special, and they spend a lot of time focusing on the fact that it is.